Welcome to the Good Talk Podcast, where we remind you of the joy of life, the love of God, and the possibilities that lie ahead. Pete and Jordan here with episode 32.
What forgiveness is not.
You nailed that.
I know. It's like we talk about these things or something.
I know. We really don't script that stuff out.
No, we don't script it out, but we know what's going on.
Yeah.
Thankfully. We are our own producers here at the Good Talk Podcast.
Our own tech people, our own lighting people, our own audio people, our own camera people.
You can probably
our own
tell.
Timer people. That's why the lighting changes on YouTube.
We're so learning.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's all right. Speaking of learning,
Yeah.
I am learning to accept something new about you.
What?
This growing monstrosity on your face.
I got a beard, y'all.
I feel like you're just trying to compete with like my growing belly and you're like, I'm going to do something to stand out.
No, I do. I have a beard. I've never had a beard in my life. I mean, I've always had a little, not always, only in the past couple years have I even had scruff.
Yes.
I used to shave every single day
Clean-shaved.
for probably 22 years of my life.
Yeah.
And then I got a little scruff, and now I've been kind of playing around with it, and I let it grow out a little bit, and then I always cut it back. But this time I'm in. I am committed.
I really love the scruff, and I'm even okay with like a little bit longer than scruff.
What about this?
This is a lot.
Oh, it's not even close to where I'm going.
I don't know.
I have a vision.
It just doesn't. Okay.
I
Yep.
want it to grow long enough that I can sit down with a real barber and be like, shape my beard.
Oh my goodness. It's okay.
Well, can I tell you my problem with it right now?
Sure.
I'm at a real point of no return because
No, we're not.
No.
We
Listen,
can turn this
listen,
bus around right now.
It's a summer issue because I'm already getting sun from being outside a lot, being on the farm. If I shave it now, I'm gonna have the weirdest like tan line right down the side of my face. So I feel like at this point, I just got to roll with it.
Okay. How about we just shorten it? Is that too much to ask? Yeah. I think baby Pepper is gonna be scared when she comes into the
Maybe.
world to a caveman.
You know what I'm having to get used to? Your new obsession with the show Friends. It's like you discovered it for the first time.
Okay. Okay.
You know, it's like
Valid.
25 years old.
I know. So, my parents watched it when I was little, and I never watched it because I just was, doing my own thing. But I think it's just the fact that at night I go to bed so much earlier now because I just get tired. But at night it's something like mindless.
You like to unwind.
And happy. Mm-hmm. And, I think you would probably turn on the local news, and that to me is just like, there was a murder on 4th Avenue.
Yeah,
and then
it's
there's,
heavy.
It's just like, I don't know.
Not
before
anymore.
going
I
to
quit the
bed,
news, remember?
because we're watching Friends.
Well, I quit the news back in like January.
Either way. But yeah, I love it. And then the new like reunion thing has been.
Yeah, that's
on
brand.
the
It just
news.
happened, right? They just
Yeah,
did
so Friends had a reunion. Listen, I know I'm like totally a poser right now because I've only watched for probably a month, and there are people out there who are diehard like Friends fans, which I think is awesome. But anyway, this whole like reunion thing sparked my new interest in it. I was like, I don't know why I've never watched this. This is like one of the most famous sitcoms of all time.
You know how much money they make?
Actually, yes, I looked it up.
How much?
So early on, like, I think first couple seasons, they were making like $25,000, $30,000 an episode, which
Yep.
back then, that's a lot. That was
Yeah.
a lot of money. And then once they got to the end of their seasons, they had all escalated, and it was like $1 million.
I thought it was
per
$1 million. I
episode.
remember them being like the first people I'd heard of being paid $1 million per episode.
$1 million per episode. And then even now, I looked it up, they are making $20 million a year just on reruns, each of them.
Shut up.
$20 million a year just on reruns.
Do you think, Jordan, one day
No.
the reruns of the Good Talk podcast could bring us in millions?
I was literally just thinking, I was like, can you imagine? I mean, the prep work that it takes to do anything, like pick your job. I don't care. But thinking about just $1 million for recording an episode. And I know it's a lot of work and crazy talent and all that, but still.
Yeah.
Holy moly. But yeah, I'm loving
That's
it.
crazy.
It's
I want to
like
watch
all I do.
Reunion, but it's on HBO Max, and I'm not
know.
forking out the money for it.
We pick our streaming.
I thought it was going to get so much cheaper, and now it's getting more expensive because you have to get a subscription to every darn
Everything.
thing to watch stuff.
I know. It's like
They're gonna win. They're gonna win. In the end, they're gonna get their money.
I was telling somebody, I was like, you know what? Maybe one day there will be someone that comes out and just like aggregates all the streamers and says, hey, if you pay this one price, you get all these channels. And they're like, Jordan, that's cable.
Cable, exactly.
Yeah.
Which
So
we
it's
got
like
rid of.
going
And yeah,
backward. It's a merry-go-round. But
it
anyway.
really is.
Well,
Yeah, it's a lot. But
yeah.
oh well.
Okay, so speaking of friends and sometimes people we need to forgive.
Ooh, yeah. I wanted to get into
Forgiveness.
this and talk about forgiveness some today. I've spent a lot of my life, most of my life, in kind of the personal growth space, whether it be in the church world. Now I'm doing some of my own life coaching. Like, it's an area that I'm fully committed to. I love being surrounded by people who they're accepting of where they're at today, but they know that there's more.
Yeah.
Right. And usually with people, whether it's I'm speaking to a group of people, whether I'm doing coaching with someone one-on-one, there's almost always something in their life that's blocking them or keeping them from getting to where it is that they want to go or becoming who it is that they want to be. Right.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of different things and everybody's different. But one of the things that's interesting to me is something that almost always pops up for people at some point in their life that holds them back, that keeps them from growing, is unforgiveness. That's the baggage that a lot of people carry around. There's a grudge that they've been nursing sometimes for years. It's bitterness that kind of is just boiling over in their life. And there's just, I think a lot of things that hold people out. There's a verse in Hebrews chapter 12 that talks about, watch out that no poisonous root of bitterness grows up in your life, corrupting many. And I always that visual of that no bitterness root. Like I was on the farm this week, and over by the barn where we planted those bushes for our wedding.
The wedding, yeah.
Well, like it's being overtaken by all these vines. It might be poison oak, by the way. I'm not sure. But I start kind of pulling at all this stuff. And then it was all coming from one root that was under the ground that literally had covered all four of those bushes and was going up the side of the barn.
Wow.
But those roots were
One
growing
root.
under sand. It's like the idea of that kind of phrase, no poisonous root of bitterness, is speaking to the fact, and we all know this to be true, that bitterness spreads. It's not contaminated. And so you may be justified in your bitterness, but it still contaminates everything. In other words, it's not isolated to the person
one thing
that you're bitter towards.
Right.
It's going to impact all of your relationships, even the people who aren't at all involved in what happened that made you bitter, angry, or upset, right? And so I guess I'd start by saying to everybody that's listening, you may be completely justified in your bitterness. You may be completely justified. You may have every right in the world to not forgive certain people in your life. Because when you get hurt and it's deep and it's unfair, you want the other person to hurt back. You want them to know, right? The pain that they inflicted on you. You want them to pay. I know what that feels like. You know what that feels like, right?
Yeah, and you think somehow withholding your forgiveness is helping encourage their own pain.
Yeah, I think it is human nature to want the person who hurt you to hurt back. But again, you have to understand that this bitterness, this unforgiveness contaminates everything. It's not isolated to the source of the bitterness. And so one of the things that I feel like I'm learning more and more is that sometimes you don't forgive someone for their sake. You do it for your own freedom.
Totally.
Right? Because I liken resentment to, like, just make a tight fist right now. If you're listening to this, like, and have a hand free, like, just make a really tight fist, like as tight as you possibly can. I think when there's bitterness and there's unforgiveness in your life, that's what your heart is like, right? It is tight, it's taut, it's constricted, it's unable to accept, to receive, it's not open, right? And so when your heart's not open, you can't love, right? You can't love when your heart's closed. You can't love yourself. You can't love the people in your life. And so, when you love yourself, right? This is what's so important. This is why I think forgiveness and letting go of bitterness is so important. It's like letting go of that tight fist, and it's opening up your heart so you can love. So when you love yourself, you thrive. When you love other people around you, you're going to grow. When you love life, healing begins.
Right. It's not like when you open that, let's just go back to the metaphor. When you open your hand, it's not that you're extending love to that person necessarily that hurt you. It's just that you're now opening your own heart so that it can be open to everything else, because
That's right.
it's so restricted when
That's
you
right.
hold on to bitterness.
That's the interesting thing about closing your heart off because of your bitterness and your resentment. It's keeping you from receiving, right, love,
Yeah.
and loving yourself, loving others, right, and loving life. It impacts everything. And that's why this act of forgiveness, I think, is so crucial, is because it allows your heart to open up. Now, I'll tell you where I see a ton of people get stuck, and that's where I want to camp out for just a few minutes. I think a lot of people don't engage in the exercise of forgiveness because they're very confused about what it is. And they think that forgiveness is something that it's not. And so there's 3 things that I see people get stuck on all the time. First thing is that people confuse forgiveness with forgetting. So they think in order to forgive, what that means is you have to forget.
Right.
And I think in almost every case, that's impossible.
Yeah. Oh,
It,
yeah.
it just is. It's like we carry this tape recorder around in our souls that records every hurt. And the problem is, as long as you're breathing, there's not a stop button and there's not an erase button.
Yeah.
But there is a volume control,
Yes.
right? And that's what forgiveness does. You're not forgetting the event, right? But you are able to turn down the volume on that hurt and that pain. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think if you look at some of the people that I know, whoever in your life that would say like, oh yeah, that I forgot totally about. Like if someone claims to have forgotten a circumstance that was deeply hurtful, they absolutely have not. And
For sure.
probably also means they've done zero work with that and done zero growth and zero healing.
And it's impacting them in ways they have no idea.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So I think that's so true. It's almost like the whole like forgive and forget. I feel like that was such a thing for so long, and forgetting actually is super unhealthy. It doesn't mean forgetting means also holding on, but forgetting to me means lack of healing, lack of growth, lack of any sort of work towards getting over that.
Yeah. But I like that imagery of what you just created, because then it goes back to that root of bitterness again. That root, like I had no idea all those roots were spreading under that ground, taking over those bushes and the side of the barn, right? Until I started pulling it up, and I was like, holy cow, look at all these places it was. So again, just because you don't remember it in this moment, just because it doesn't mean it's not impacting you.
Yeah.
So you gotta get to that point. Again, forgiveness is not forgetting, it's not erasing it. It's just turning the volume down on that pain. Yeah. It's reframing the event or whatever it is that happened or occurred in your life.
Okay.
All right. Second thing forgiveness is not condoning. And this is a big one. People
huge.
really get stuck here. It doesn't mean that you condone what it is that the other person did wrong. It doesn't mean that you excuse what they did. Forgiveness is not the same as excusing someone. It doesn't mean that you decide that you're going to tolerate injustice because injustice needs to be fought.
Yeah. Yep. I remember you posted something. It was a quote on Instagram. I don't know when, but it was essentially something like, if there are people in your life that are constantly reminding you of your past, it might be good to leave them in your past.
Yep.
More or less, that was what the quote said. And people got so upset about that because they thought you were like essentially saying you shouldn't be held accountable, which is what this condoning thing is about. It's not saying like, oh, yeah, forget you. I'm going to just keep living my life moving forward. I'm not taking any sort of accountability for things that I've done. But that really rubs people the wrong way. It really rubs people the wrong way. And I don't know. I guess it goes back to the whole concept of if they feel like they forgive you, they are condoning you. That's how they, in your mind, we think we have so much control over somebody else that our own forgiveness would somehow condone their behavior.
Yeah, but it's not. You can forgive someone without condoning them. And then that third area that I see people get stuck is, and again, this is a huge one. Forgiveness is not reconciliation.
Oh, not always.
Not always. It can be.
Yeah.
It can be, but that reconciliation is a completely different thing than
Yes.
forgiveness.
Yes.
They're two separate acts. So forgiving someone doesn't mean you're always going to reconcile with that person.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can't reconcile. Like you can forgive someone who has died. You
Yeah.
can't reconcile
Yeah.
with that person,
Oh,
right?
it's so hard.
Also, if the other person's not willing to acknowledge their part at all, you can't build a relationship safely unless there's truth, right? With no truth, there's no trust. With no trust, there's no relationship. So a lot of times I think people get stuck because they're like, oh gosh, to forgive them means I have to reconcile with them and be in a relationship with them again. And I know that's not healthy for me. Well, no. You can forgive them, which is healthy, right? But not necessarily reconcile with them. Sometimes that's healthy to reconcile. Sometimes it's not healthy to reconcile, right?
Yeah. And I think, I know I can think of people right now that in my past life, I've completely forgiven how I felt like I was treated, but they're toxic for me. They're toxic people. And so I know even if I forgave them and took them to lunch and all that, I would leave that lunch feeling horrible because it's just that relationship is not a good relationship. And I know you've experienced the same. And, I think the hardest part about this is when you do like cross the line of forgiveness and you want to reconcile and the other party doesn't.
Yeah.
I think that's the most painful thing is because you did a lot of work to get to the place where you were ready to reconcile, and then to be denied is very hard. I know you've experienced that.
Yes, and that's exactly why I think you have to separate the two.
Yeah.
As two separate acts.
Yeah.
There's forgiving, right? And the outcome of what happens after that, is not always going to be in your control. What is in your control is making that choice to forgive. So I think it's a really important to remember forgiveness doesn't mean you forget. It doesn't mean you condone, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you reconcile either.
So what is it? What does it mean?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I think to put it as simply as I can, I would say forgiveness is choosing love over hate. It's essentially, it's letting go of your right to hurt them back. Right? Because ultimately that's your desire, is you want them to pay. You want them to hurt in the same way that you hurt. To forgive means that you let go of your desire to hurt them back. And whenever you forgive someone, essentially what you're doing is you're refusing to take higher moral ground, right? Because that's what you say. That's why it's so hard for us to forgive. Like if you refuse to forgive, you always feel like you've one-upped them. You always feel like you're kind of a little bit better than them, right? You have put them down as an inferior person, and you've set yourself up as the superior person.
Yes.
Right? So what happens then in forgiveness is you're saying, I refuse to put myself up here and you down here, right? We are both human. We've both made lots of mistakes in our lives, and I'm going to let go of my desire, my right to hurt you back, and I'm letting you free. And when you do that again, it's that tight fist. It just begins to release.
That's such a good visual to think, because you're right. We do. When we think we are holding something over somebody, we are holding it over them because we think we are also above them.
Yep.
And that is that's really convicting, because to get to the place where you're emotionally and mentally okay to say, all right, we're on the same playing field, that's very humbling.
Yep. Oh, I just thought of a fourth thing forgiveness is not.
Okay.
I know I'm doing this kind of out of order, but it just hit me because this is another place I see people get stuck. Forgiveness is not a one-time act.
Oh my gosh.
Rarely do you just say to yourself, I forgive that person, and then it's just like heart wide open, right? Usually it is a process. So what I see is people are like, okay, I'm forgiving that person. And then 2 days later, they feel some bitterness creep back in. They're like, dang it, I didn't do it right.
Yeah.
No, you probably did do it right. It's just not a one-time decision. It is continually, whenever you feel that disturbance inside of you, that hurt inside of you, allowing that energy to pass through you instead of grabbing onto it and holding onto it and nursing that grudge, that bitterness, right?
You're nursing the forgiveness instead of the grudge.
That's right. That's right. You let that you feel the pain, you feel the disturbance, nothing you can do about that, but then you let that pass through. And I think that that's really important. I think a lot of people get stuck just thinking to themselves, I'm not good at this whole forgiveness thing.
Right. Or this pain was too much, or this person is too like prevalent in my life. Like,
Yep.
I feel like there's certain people in my life that I was like, I don't know how I'm ever going to get to the place where I can just walk by that person and be okay and just literally have it not impact my soul. But you're right. It's such a like step by step by step. And sometimes you are backwards and you're
Yeah.
having to take that same step again. And I
And
don't know.
I think we set up some of those false expectations in church at times. And I know not all of you listen to this come from a religious background, but a lot of times in church, in an effort to help people release things, we'll do little illustrations. I remember I did this several times where it talked about there's a scene in the Bible where people had stones and wanted to stone a woman who had committed adultery. And we talked about the whole act of not judging other people, like releasing them and put your stone down and walk away, as if it was just like a one-time thing. Or pray this prayer that you want to forgive and release this person and it will be done. Yeah, again, great first step, but it's a process. And so I think we just need to remember that depending on who you are, how you're wired, what happened to you, how many times it happened to you, this is a process.
Yeah. And even if you have to start the process selfishly motivated to say, I want my heart to be soft again.
Yes.
Because it's not always going to be, I want to forgive this person to release them. I think a lot of times you've got to get to a place in your own heart and mind where you have the awareness to say, I want to be healthy. I want to be able to be open to other things. I want to have healthier relationships, whatever that is. But I think a lot of times big changes in our lives have to start with big motivations. And that to me is a big one.
It is. Someone shared this with me years ago, and it's always stuck with me. Just talking about the beauty of forgiveness, of what happens when we release somebody. As it says, forgiveness reveals three goodnesses simultaneously. So when you forgive, what you experience is you choose the goodness of the other person over their faults. So there's that goodness. You choose their goodness over their faults. Then you experience God's goodness flowing through you in that moment. And then we also experience our own capacity for goodness in a way that almost surprises us because we never knew if we could let go of that bitterness and hurt. And so I've always thought that's a beautiful thing. I picture these three streams kind of converging, right, into this really powerful flowing river of love and force that these three goodnesses happen. You choose their goodness over their faults. You experience God's goodness flowing through you, and you experience your own capacity for goodness all in one act.
That's really good.
And I just think that that's really cool. And so I know forgiveness isn't easy. I think it costs a lot to forgive. The only thing I think it'll cost you more than forgiveness is the cost of not forgiving, right? The cost of going your whole life with a closed heart full of bitterness and not experiencing the joy you were designed to enjoy, thinking somehow you were hurting the other person when in fact you're just hurting yourself.
So true.
So it's not easy. It's really hard. I think that it's one of the most important practices that we can learn to let people go free and experience our forgiveness. I think it's crucial.
It's really good. I'm like trying to think of. I feel like we should all. Okay, everybody. Maybe I'm taking your application.
No, go ahead.
I feel like we all if we all just had that one person. Would you say that the first step with like forgiveness for if we have like a single person in mind, are you letting that person know that you're forgiving them, or is it just kind of like internal?
I don't think you have to.
Yeah.
But I do think that there will be something more freeing if you do. There's an interaction, there's a closure that I think that happens when you reach out to that person and you let them know that you are choosing their goodness over their faults. You're choosing to let go of your right to hurt them back. There's again, it's another step, and that's not even necessarily reconciliation, right? That's in between.
That's just
right. But I do think I think you can forgive without doing that, but I do think that takes it to a different level of healing.
That's good
for you and for them. Because why go to all that work to not also pass that healing on to them?
Yeah, that's good. All right, so everybody, take your one person That's your homework.
Yep. And there's probably some work you need to do before you reach out to them. But,
For sure.
I did.
I forgive you.
I forgive you.
Oh, crap. No, I don't.
It's that could go really bad. But
That's good.
I think it's a lot of work, but it's worth the work. So if you need to buy some books, listen to some messages, go to therapy, do whatever you got to do to start that journey.
Yeah, it's good. I love it.
It's a game changer.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you know
Good
somebody,
talk.
that, thank you. I love it when you work the name of the podcast back in.
That's the whole point.
It's a good talk. It's a good
Good
talk. If you know somebody that is struggling, maybe they're struggling with bitterness and resentment or having a hard time letting go, maybe you just share this podcast with them. Maybe this will be the beginning of some healing for them as they begin to start that process and start that journey. As always, if this podcast has been helpful for you, it would mean the world to us if you would subscribe, leave a review. As you know, if you'll leave a review, take a picture of it, send it to us at
info@theplaceforgood.com.
Then we'll send you the 30 Days of Good journal, completely free, just a little way to say thank you for leaving that review.
Yep.
Because it does really make a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so as you go on your journey, whatever it is that you're working on these days, may the Lord bless you and protect you. May he smile on you and be gracious to you. May he show you his favor and give you his peace.